My mom didn't sound angry when she said it. She sounded relieved. "Don't come home, Rowan. Your sister doesn't want you here." That was the moment I realized I wasn't being pushed out by accident. I was being erased on purpose. I was 19, standing outside my dorm with my phone pressed to my ear. Finals were over. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I just wanted to hear my mom's voice and feel like I still belonged somewhere. I told her I was coming home for the summer. I even smiled when I said it. There was a pause. Not the kind filled with worry. The kind filled with decision. Then she said those words, calm and steady, like she had practiced them. I laughed softly at first, thinking she was joking. "What do you mean she doesn't want me there? It's my home too." She sighed, tired. "Maribel has been stressed. She needs space right now." I waited for my dad to step in. He always did before. I heard him in the background, and she put the phone on speaker. He didn't hesitate. "It's better this way, Rowan," he said. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder for who? I wanted to ask. For me or for them? I stood there with my backpack at my feet, realizing they had already talked about this. They had already agreed. My place in that house had been discussed and removed, without me in the room. No one asked where I would go. No one asked how I felt. When the call ended, the silence around me felt heavier than the words. That night, something inside me cracked quietly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to understand that I wasn't leaving home. I was being told I no longer had won. When I looked back later, the signs had always been there. I just didn't want to see them. Maribel was 3 years younger than me, but somehow she always came first. If she forgot her homework, the teacher was unfair. If she failed a test, the subject was too hard. If she cried, the whole house stopped moving until she felt better. When I asked questions, I was called difficult. When I disagreed, I was disrespectful. When I wanted to decide things for myself, I was told I was changing. I learned early that being quiet kept the peace. But being quiet also made me invisible. After high school, I chose community college because it was what I could afford. I worked part-time and tried to handle my life on my own. My parents said they were proud, but their voices never sounded convinced. While I was gone, things shifted without me knowing. Maribel took my old bedroom. My posters came down. My books were boxed. My closet was cleared like I had already moved out forever. My mom said it made sense because you're not really here anymore. No one asked if I was coming back. At family gatherings, they stopped mentioning me. When relatives asked, my parents would say, "Rowan wanted independence," or "She likes being on her own." They made it sound like my absence was my choice. Over time, even they began to believe it. I heard about it later from a cousin who didn't mean to hurt me. She said, "Your mom told everyone you didn't want to be part of the family anymore." I sat there smiling politely while something inside me sank. They hadn't just replaced me. They had rewritten me. In their version of the story, Maribel stayed loyal. She stayed home. She stayed easy to love. And I became the daughter who walked away, so they wouldn't have to admit they were the ones who let me go. At first, I told myself it was just a misunderstanding. After that phone call, I waited. I kept my phone beside me at all times, even when I slept. I thought maybe my mom would call back once things cooled down. Maybe my dad would realize how wrong it felt. No one did. 1 day passed. Then 3. Then a full week. I sent short messages. Nothing dramatic. Just, "Are you okay?" No reply. I tried calling again. It rang until voicemail. Every time. The silence began to feel heavy, like it was pressing against my chest. 2 weeks later, a message finally came. It wasn't from my parents. It was from Maribel. "Please stop making things stressful for everyone. Mom's health can't take it." That was all. No hello. No care. Just blame. I stared at the screen for a long time, reading the words again and again. That was when I understood something painful. This wasn't about space. This wasn't about time. They had chosen a life without me in it. I didn't reply. I didn't beg. Something inside me went quiet. I moved out of my dorm when the semester ended. I didn't have anywhere permanent to go, so a friend let me sleep on her couch. I folded my clothes into one bag and tried not to cry when I turned off the light at night. I picked up a second job cleaning offices in the evening. During the day, I worked at a cafe. I was tired all the time, but being busy kept me from thinking too much. No one asked if I was safe. No one asked if I was eating. I learned how to survive without backup, without comfort, without family. That silence taught me something no argument ever could. When people stop reaching for you, It isn't because they forgot. It's because letting you go was easier than keeping you. Time didn't heal everything, but it did teach me how to stand on my own. Years passed slowly at first, then all at once. I found a small apartment with thin walls and a window that faced the parking lot. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I paid my bills on time. I finished school. I learned how to breathe without waiting for anyone's approval. That was when I met Caleb. He wasn't loud or charming in a dramatic way. He listened more than he spoke. He noticed small things, like when I went quiet during holidays or avoided questions about family. I didn't tell him my whole story at once. I shared it in pieces. A sentence here, a memory there. He never pushed. He just nodded and stayed. With him, I felt safe in a way I hadn't before. Sometimes distant relatives would reach out. A cousin would mention a birthday party I didn't know about. An aunt would casually ask why I never came to family dinners anymore. That was how I learned things. Maribel's promotions. Maribel's new car. Maribel's celebrations. My parents talked about her proudly, like she was their only child. When my name came up, it was usually followed by silence or a quick change of subject. I wasn't included in photos. I wasn't part of stories. It was as if I had quietly disappeared from their lives. Once, a cousin sent me a picture from a holiday dinner. Everyone was smiling around the table I used to sit at. I stared at it longer than I should have. It hurt, but not in the sharp way it used to. It was dull now. Familiar. By then, I had my own routines. My own friends. My own life. Still, there were moments when I wondered if they ever thought about me. If my mom ever reached for the phone and stopped herself. They didn't ask how I was doing. They didn't ask where I lived. And I finally understood something important. The life I was building didn't matter to them. But it mattered to me. And that was enough to keep going. Caleb proposed on a quiet evening at home. There was no crowd, no big plan. Just the two of us sitting on the floor, eating takeout and laughing about something small. When he reached into his pocket, I didn't understand at first. When he asked me to marry him, my hands started shaking. I said yes through tears I didn't expect. For a few days, everything felt light. Then reality settled in. Are you going to tell your family? Caleb asked gently. The word family tightened something in my chest. I told him I wasn't sure. I didn't want drama. I didn't want old wounds reopened. He didn't pressure me. He just said, you don't have to forgive anyone. But maybe you deserve clarity. On your terms. That stayed with me. So I sent a simple wedding announcement. No long message. No emotions. Just facts. Date. Location. My name beside Caleb's. I didn't expect a response. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was bright, almost excited, like nothing had ever happened. Rowan, we got your announcement. Why didn't you call first? I didn't know how to answer that. She continued talking, fast and cheerful. She said they would, of course, attend. My father agreed in the background. Then she added, Maribel is excited too. She insists on coming. Not one apology. Not one question about where I'd been all those years. They spoke as if they had never told me not to come home. As if time had erased everything without effort. When the call ended, I sat quietly, staring at the wall. They hadn't reached out because they missed me. They reached out because something important was happening, and they wanted their place in it. For the first time, I understood the shift. They didn't hold power over my life anymore, but they still believed they did. And this wedding, whether they knew it or not, was about to change that balance completely. Wedding planning should have been happy, but every conversation with my family felt heavy. My mom had opinions about everything. The dress was too simple. The venue was too small. She kept comparing it to Maribel's life. Your sister would have chosen something more elegant, she said once, like it was advice and not judgment. I reminded her gently that this was my wedding. She smiled, thin and quick, then changed the subject. My father acted confused whenever the past came up. When I mentioned how long we hadn't spoken, he shrugged. You disappeared too, Rowan. It wasn't just us. His words stunned me. They talked like the silence was shared, like we had both walked away at the same time. They ignored the phone calls I made, the messages I sent, the nights I waited for replies that never came. To them, time had softened everything into something easier to live with. Maribel stayed close during planning, always polite, always smiling. In front of others, she hugged me and called me sis. But when we were alone, her tone shifted. It wasn't easy for us either, she said once. You leaving really hurt Mom. Leaving. That word again. She spoke like I had packed my bags out of choice, not because I was told not to come home. She painted herself as the one left behind, the one who had to deal with the mess I created. Sometimes she'd sigh and say, "I just hope this wedding doesn't bring up old drama." I wanted to laugh. They remembered what was comfortable. They forgot what was painful, because the pain hadn't belonged to them. Listening to them talk, I realized something quietly terrifying. They didn't know who I was anymore. They didn't know how I survived. They didn't know what it cost me. They were meeting a version of me frozen in their memory, the girl they once pushed away and never bothered to understand. And for the first time, I stopped trying to correct them. I simply listened, because when people rewrite the past so easily, the truth eventually demands to be spoken out loud. The rehearsal dinner was small and quiet, held in a private room at a local restaurant. Soft music played in the background, and everyone tried to act normal. I could feel the tension anyway. Maribel sat across from me, smiling too much. My parents looked relaxed, like this was all familiar territory again. Like nothing had ever broken. Halfway through dinner, someone brought up childhood stories. Maribel laughed and said, "Remember how dramatic Rowan used to be?" Every little thing felt like the end of the world to her. She said it lightly, like a joke. My parents laughed right away. My mom shook her head. She always overreacted. My dad added, "We never knew what mood she'd be in." The table chuckled. I sat still, my hands folded in my lap. No one noticed the way my chest tightened. No one remembered that my drama had been fear, loneliness, and asking not to be ignored. Across the table, Caleb went quiet. I felt his hand touch mine gently, steady and warm. He looked at me, not confused, not amused, but alert, like he was finally seeing something clearly. In that moment, I understood something painful. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a problem that had learned to behave. Someone who was acceptable now because she stayed calm and didn't complain. Someone they could joke about without consequence. Maribel smiled at me like she had won something. I realized then that if I stayed silent, nothing would change. They would keep laughing, keep rewriting, keep shrinking me to make themselves comfortable. That night, when Caleb and I got back to the hotel, he asked softly, "Do you want me to step in?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I need to do this. Not in anger. Not in revenge. But because I was done letting my life be discussed like a punchline. The wedding was coming. And I wasn't going to walk into it pretending everything was fine anymore. The wedding day arrived brighter than I expected. Everything moved quickly, music, smiles, hugs, photos. I focused on Caleb, on the way he looked at me like I was safe. That was the only thing that kept my hands steady. At the reception, glasses clinked. Someone called out for me to say a few words. I stood up slowly. People expected the usual thanks. Parents, family, support, love. I took a breath. "I want to thank everyone who came today," I said calmly. "And before we celebrate more, there's something I need to say." The room quieted. I looked toward my parents, then at Maribel. When I was 19, after my first year away, I called home. I told my mom I was coming back for the summer. A few people shifted in their seats. She told me not to come home. She said my sister didn't want me there. Gasps spread softly through the room. I asked my dad if that was true, I continued. He said it was better that way. My voice didn't shake. I didn't raise it. That night, I didn't come home. I didn't go anywhere. I just learned that my place in my family was already gone. No insults. No anger. Just facts. I wasn't asked where I would live. I wasn't called afterward. And for years, I was told that I had chosen to leave. I paused, letting the words settle. "I'm not sharing this to hurt anyone," I said. "I'm sharing it because today is about honesty." And this moment shaped who I became. The room was silent. My mother stared at the table. My father didn't look up. Maribel's smile had vanished completely. I finished softly. I built my life anyway. And today, I'm grateful for the people who chose me when I wasn't chosen before. Then I smiled, thanked everyone, and sat down. No yelling. No tears. Just the truth, finally spoken out loud. After I sat down, the room didn't return to normal. Whispers moved from table to table. People looked at my parents, then back at me. The music started again, but it felt distant, like it didn't belong. Maribel was the first to react. She stood up too quickly, her chair scraping the floor. "That's not how it happened," she said, laughing nervously. "Rowan always twists things." She was emotional back then. My mother rushed in. "We never meant it that way," she said. It was just a misunderstanding. Families have complicated moments. My father added, she left too. It wasn't only us. Their words came fast, overlapping, desperate to smooth everything over. But something had already changed. Relatives began remembering things out loud. Someone said, "We did wonder why Rowan was never around." Another whispered, "I thought she was working overseas or something." The pieces were finally lining up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt. When someone asked me quietly if it was true, I nodded. Yes, that's exactly what happened. Nothing more. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to convince anyone. The years of absence spoke louder than any argument. Maribel's face tightened as she realized she couldn't control the story anymore. The version where she was fragile and I was difficult began to fall apart. My parents tried smiling again, pretending everything was fine. But their laughter sounded thin. Forced. People were watching now. Not judging loudly, but noticing. I felt something strange in my chest. Not victory. Not happiness. Relief. For so long, they had held the power because they held the story. They decided who I was when I wasn't in the room. Now the truth stood on its own, calm and undeniable. I didn't expose them. I simply stopped protecting them. And once that happened, the family narrative was no longer theirs to rewrite. It belonged to reality, and everyone could finally see it. We didn't stay until the end of the reception. After the speeches and quiet conversations, Caleb leaned close and asked, "Are you ready?" I looked around the room one last time. My parents were sitting stiffly, speaking in low voices. Maribel avoided my eyes. No one came over to apologize. No one tried to explain. And I realized something clearly. They weren't going to change tonight. So I nodded. Caleb and I slipped out quietly, hand in hand. There was no scene. No announcement. Just the sound of the door closing behind us. Outside, the air felt lighter. Cooler. Like I could finally breathe fully. I expected to feel sad. Or angry. Or empty. Instead, I felt calm. For years, I had waited for them to choose me again. To admit what they did. To say they were sorry. But walking away that night, I understood I didn't need that anymore. The truth had already been spoken. That was enough. The revenge wasn't embarrassing them. It wasn't shouting or punishment. It was freedom. They could no longer pretend I vanished by choice. They could no longer erase me quietly from their story. I existed. Publicly. Honestly. Caleb squeezed my hand and smiled. "I'm proud of you," he said. I smiled back, and for the first time it felt natural. We drove off together, just us, toward a life built on choice, not obligation. I didn't go back to that house again. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something important. Home isn't the place that rejected you. It's the place where you are seen, believed, and allowed to stay without begging. That night, I didn't lose my family. I reclaimed myself. And that was something no one could ever take away from me again. If this story touched you, remember this. Emotional neglect can be as harmful as words spoken aloud. You deserve clarity, boundaries, and self-respect. If you believe in healing through truth, support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Your support helps more real stories reach those who need them.